Tonight's special guest speaker, Dr. Toby Daly-Engel, is an associate professor at Florida Institute of Technology. Originally from upstate New York, Dr. Daly-Engel received a Master's of Science and a PhD from the University of Hawaii. Right? Nice. Following graduate school, she spent 3 years as a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Arizona before becoming an assistant professor at the University of West Florida in 2012. She moved to Melbourne in 2017 to become the director of the Shark Conservation Lab at Florida Tech, where she and her students study the ecology, evolution, and conservation of sharks and other large migratory marine animals. She also collaborates extensively with fishermen, natural resource managers, and the public to develop new tools for fisheries conservation. Some of her research has even been featured on Nat Geo's Shark Fest and the Discovery Channel's Shark Week. Tonight, Dr. Daly-Engel will tell us about her research into the effects of climate change on the movement patterns of tiger sharks and bull sharks. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Toby Daly-Engel.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Judd, for inviting me, and thank you all for coming and seeing how much better I can do than Dr. Ajemian. He's fine. So I'm from Florida Tech, just a little bit up the coast, and I'd like to talk to you today about some of the research that we're doing up there, and also some things that you might not know about sharks. So, I'm gonna help if it this worked. All right. Is that not? Hates me. Okay, it just worked like way too well in rehearsal. So I'll just go ahead and check it out. So things you might know about sharks. They're fish, right? They usually live in the ocean. Not always, but usually. They could eat you, but they won't, I swear. And they often look like this. I'm not sure what's happening with Rihanna there, but when you Google the word shark, this is what comes up, inevitably. And I keep doing this, hoping it'll actually work. Sure, might as well. I'll keep talking when we do this. It's way too smooth. I know it's working, it's just not talking to the thing anymore. It's like the same exact guy. Hey, look at that. All right, so things you might not know about sharks. They're a lot more diverse than people realize. In fact, all of these things are sharks, including the rays, which are just flat sharks. And something else you might not know, they're really old. They've been around for quite a long time. They are actually the first first animal with closing jaws, including this one really weird guy you can probably see on the bottom right of your screen. This is called the helicoprion, or the buzzsaw shark. So there's not only a lot of weird ones, but they've had a lot of time to get weird. And they've made a lot of innovations. So closing jaws, right, hence the movie. The adaptive immune system, pretty good, right? Sex. Thanks, sharks. I like how the people in the background are taking pictures. Yeah, so they invented sex. They also invented pregnancy, so thanks for nothing. Yeah, they have placentas. Even some of them are born with little umbilical cords. And so they're actually a lot more like us than a lot of people realize. But they do what we do, but really slowly. They grow and reproduce really slowly. I mean, who thinks this was like the one oldest Greenland shark they got in the ocean that they sampled that turned out to be 450 years old? No, these things are like Joshua trees. And therefore, their pregnancies last a long time, anywhere from 7 to 36 months. I know, right? Yes, ladies. And they have some really interesting modes of reproduction. I mean, mammals, we look pretty different from a lot of mammals, but we all kind of reproduce the same. Sharks look very similar to each other, but there's everything from live birth with little umbilical cords and placentas and everything to egg laying. And even things like, you can see up here on the top left of your screen, this was recently discovered. It's a shark with a clear egg case. We didn't even know it existed. Yeah. Something else you might not know about sharks, they're in trouble. Unfortunately, we know that about 100 million sharks are killed per year. And given how long they live, that's not nothing. Just in the past 50 years, there's been an 18 to 20-fold increase in fishing pressure on sharks. Over just the past 50 years, we now know we've lost over 70% of all sharks. And for those of you who fish who are saying, nope, there's way more sharks who are taking fish off of my hook than there used to be, you're right. They're just not anywhere else. They can't get their natural food, so they're coming to the fishing spots. Because again, 400 years, you learn some stuff. And unfortunately, over 30% of the ones that are left are what we consider vulnerable or endangered with extinction. So where does the research come in? Here we are in an amazing place in the world, in Florida, and we have one of the most rich waterways in the country, if not the world, the Indian River Lagoon. And bays and estuaries like the Indian River are really important for sharks and other fishes. What they do is they act as nursery habitat. Here in the Indian River Lagoon, Kaneohe Bay on Oahu, where my marine lab was when I went and got my degree, which didn't suck. And, and the Chesapeake, all of these places are chock full of baby fish, including baby sharks. And so raise your hand if you've heard that the IRL is a nursery for baby bull sharks. Yes, it is. The mamas come in, they'll go upriver too. They'll go up the Banana River. They'll go up there in Crane Creek and they give birth and then they leave. And the babies hang around and they grow and they eat cute, little crustaceans and whatnot, like shark baby food. And then when they get bigger, they leave and they join the adult population and they start to migrate. And if you've ever wondered why has nobody ever been bit or been able to catch a bull shark, big one, in the IRL, it's because the mothers shut off the feeding response. They don't feed at all, because if they did, they'd eat the pups. And so you can't catch one for love or money on a hook. But the babies stay here. This actually, it's a little hard to see. This is a picture that my buddy Yanni, who's a shark guy actually at FIU, took when we were coming back from fishing one day. We were tagging sharks, and he said, "Stop the boat!" And he said, he had back in the day when there were like underwater cameras and not phones, and he put it under the boat, and he clicked the shutter, and he got this picture. And if you look, it's actually a school of hammerheads, and they're all pregnant, every single one. Right? Looking for pickles and ice cream. And so these are what we consider essential fish habitat. Any essential fish habitat is habitat that's specially protected because it is critical for the survival of the species. And so sharks, adult sharks, they can kind of go wherever they want, but the babies have to stay in the nursery habitat, and they're there year-round. And so this is really critical habitat, often very vulnerable because it's right up against human populations. So in the IRL, not only is this a rich nursery habitat for bull sharks, but for as long as anybody knew, it was the furthest north in the entire Western Atlantic Ocean. And that's because bull sharks are a warm water creature. Again, the adults could go wherever they want, up, down. They migrate like birds, and where it's nice and warm, but the babies have to overwinter. And so they didn't go further north than Florida, Jacksonville area. So that was, forever. But this has been happening. And sure enough, we're starting to see changes in the animal populations in the ocean, including the sharks. And so what happened was, my buddy, Chuck Bangley, published a paper in 2018 showing that bull sharks had, just over the past decade or two, founded a brand new nursery in Pamlico Sound, North Carolina. And sure enough, there were sharks coming year after year, and there were babies coming year after year and using this space. And that was unprecedented. And what was interesting was they actually were able to show that it was because of warming water. It was because the water was warming, and that movement over time had gone exactly as fast as that warming had occurred. And so there was a correlation there that they showed this had happened. And so what we wanted to know was, I mean, are these guys like on walkabout, or on they vacation? Are they just having an interesting year? Are they gonna go back? Is it just ones from, say, Florida that are up there? Maybe the ones south of us haven't moved at all. And so we set out to find out what kind of response was going on. And let me tell you, what we do in my lab, it's called molecular ecology. But really what it boils down to is, some of the time we're out in the field and we're gathering data on where the sharks are going. And some of the time we're using DNA to find out what they're doing once they get there. So in terms of the field stuff that we do in my lab, we do biomonitoring, we work with the state, we work with the feds, we work with charter fishermen to monitor the wildlife. We take water and tissue samples for DNA, and we're also in the lab. So we're doing like lab-based genetics and genomics and all of that fancy omics, next-gen stuff. Of course, these require very different tools. So we're all involved in, things like boating, sometimes scuba, sampling, animal handling, tagging, fishing, netting, all kinds of telemetry. And then in the lab, of course, you have different tools, and this is really whatever molecular technique fits the question. And in my world, genetics are not a whole field. We actually don't really care what the genes do. That's the boring part. We use the genes just as another tool to study the evolution and ecology and behavior of the creature. And so some of the time, my students and I get to go into the field and do fun stuff like this. And then some of the time, we're doing fun stuff like this. I show you pictures of us wearing lab coats, but to be honest, we don't wear lab coats unless we're getting inspected, cold, or working with bleach. So this is the work of my former student Shannon Barry, who just graduated, now Dr. Barry. And so this bull shark response to climate change was a big part of her dissertation. So I'll show you what she did. She measured connections between 4 different groups of bull sharks, and these are all babies. So we're looking just at the DNA of the ones that were born just within the past couple years, because these can, again, they can live a long time. So we got DNA from those babies in Pamlico Sound, those new nursery habitat babies. We got samples from the Indian River Lagoon throughout, but mostly central. And we got samples from baby bull sharks in the historical IRL, which I'm sorry to tell you is the 90s. Yeah. But, about 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, when this all started. So this was kind of the beginning of the trend that Dr. Bangley had noticed. And then, last but not least, we got DNA from the babies in South Florida. And what Shannon did was basically just DNA fingerprinting. Like, it's the exact same technique as you would use for like 23andMe or Ancestry.com or like Jerry Springer, who's the daddy. And so she looked at those connections. No, really. And so the test that she ran, she was able to see which of these groups of babies were coming from the same population. And so what she found, I'm going to show you, and I'm not going to show you a lot of statistics or anything because I don't hate you, but I want to orient you just real quick to this. We use this, it's called FST. It's just a measure of genetic connectivity. And so when you see that little asterisk, it just means what you're looking at is two different populations. And so here's what she found. The major thing here is that turns out the population of baby bull sharks that are in the Indian River Lagoon has changed radically. It is totally different than it was in the past 30 years. Turns out the babies in North Carolina are the same exact population as the historical Indian River Lagoon sharks. The ones now in the Indian River Lagoon share a gene pool with the ones from South Florida. So what that means, this is this right there, just showing us that this Indian River Lagoon modern and historic populations are significantly different. So what does that tell us? Well, looks like bull sharks are shifting their populations. It's not just a few sharks from Jacksonville decided to go on walkabout. It's actually the sharks from probably into the Caribbean, but certainly in the Northwest Atlantic, in the US, looks like the whole population is shifting north. And that is interesting. And it's interesting because right now, there is no protected habitat for baby bull sharks north of the IRL. This is protected as essential fish habitat. NOAA Fisheries has an obligation by law to monitor EFH more strictly than almost anywhere else because we know how important they are for fish populations. Now, unfortunately, this critical habitat is in North Carolina. And now there's no laws set up to protect those guys. And so that's concerning. And not only that, it looks like maybe other species are potentially moving too. So we decided what we really need to know is, first of all, why are they moving? What is the big factor? Okay, water temperature, but we also know a lot of other things have an effect on where fish go, and also that sharks have a pretty big thermal tolerance, pretty good. So they're not actually moving, far. It's not like they're going from Florida to Nova Scotia. So where exactly are they going to be under these scenarios, under these models that climate biologists have published? So we set out to find out. And the way we do this is with gene-environment correlations, also called seascape genetics. Literally, what we do is we just take the DNA from a bunch of different individual sharks and we overlay it on a seascape. And we literally draw point correlations between the location of particular genetic diversity and the gradients in natural environmental conditions like temperature, salinity, productivity, phosphate. And then we model it, and what we get is based on that DNA, we get a more accurate predictive model of where the critical habitat for that really is now, spatially, so we can map it and we can say, okay, what's protected, what's not. But we can also project that into the future under different conditions. And so that's exactly what Shannon did. She built a model. They're actually species distribution models using genetic data. And what she found were some interesting things. First of all, she found that, sure enough, when you look across the entire Atlantic, yeah, temperature does seem to be what these animals have adapted to. There are actual, sharks are sharks. The ocean is big. We should be talking about the tiniest of needles in the most infinite haystack. And yet what we're finding is, no, it's not random. The shark with this specific gene is found here, but not here. Why? Well, come to find out, what Shannon found is they have been there for so long, they've genetically adapted to these very specific conditions. And so it's temperature that over evolutionary time has really meant the biggest changes for sharks. But, and that's over millions and millions of years, but turns out salinity is just as important, and yet this is actually driving movement more in the short term, like over hundreds of years, which is the short term for sharks. And last but certainly not least, what we did not expect, if you can see right here, this graph on the top right of your screen, those little mountains, the red and the blue, show that there are two different genetic types of bull sharks. They are not perfectly divided. More of them are found on the East Coast, more of the other kind on the Gulf Coast. They're pretty mixed, but nonetheless, this we did not expect. Because this is, you know, a 10, 12-foot animal that can go wherever it wants. And yet, come to find out, it's been using these nursery habitats off of Florida for millions and millions and millions of years. Because they're the big kid on the block. They can go wherever they want. And so instead of going anywhere, they go back to the same place over and over and over. And over time, this has resulted in very fine scale differences in how groups in different areas respond to climate. And so this kind of modeling that we're doing, it's the same kind of modeling that NOAA fisheries folks do all the time. But adding the component of the genetic ecotypes, what this shows us is that not all sharks, not all bull sharks in the same ocean are going to respond to climate change in the same way. Some are more sensitive to certain conditions and others to other conditions entirely. And so what we found when Shannon went ahead to say, okay, we're gonna model current habitat availability, how much is out there now, both ecotypes together, when we mash all of these sharks together, you can see the part in dark red, purplish, shows you the sort of optimal habitat for these animals. And that's right now, this is current. And that's with both of these different ecotypes. That's what we call them. Different types, different genetic populations that respond slightly differently to different conditions. But when we take those ecotypes apart and consider them separately, you get this for ecotype 1 and this for ecotype 2. I know. Crazy, right? And so just now, again, these are the types of things that NOAA Fisheries uses to set stock demarcations. Things like blacktip sharks are managed as two different stocks in the Atlantic and the Gulf. Bull sharks are not. A lot of sharks are not. And yet, we're finding out, by the way, we also study tiger sharks and we're seeing the same thing, which shouldn't be possible because they're so big. But they're homebodies. They're swimming around. I mean, we've got tags on them. We see them go between the Atlantic and the Gulf, but they're not reproducing there. They're going right back to their one place where they were born and their mom was born and their mom's mom was born. And now we can see that genetic signature hundreds of thousands to millions of years later. And it impacts how they will survive in the future. They have slightly different habitat requirements. So you can see if we were to go off of that top map, there's quite a lot of habitat that needs to be covered. There's no way we can protect the entire coastline. However, if we know, okay, there's this other ecotype there, and there's some very specific places that are really important just to those guys, then we have a better idea of where to focus our energy. Where do we say, okay, here's where you shouldn't fish for sharks just in the spring because they're babies then, and we'll open it up later. And so that was pretty interesting. When we go to the future, it changes even more. So this is, what this is says year 2050 best case, year 2050 worst, 2100, but this is just variation around these models, these climate models that the government publishes according to the best data. And then we run these through the models and say, okay, this is where these conditions are now. Where do you think they're gonna be in 2050? What about 2100? I mean, these are long-lived sharks. Well, this is with both of those ecotypes together. This is ecotype 1, and this is ecotype 2. So just a little different. What this tells us is if we lump them all together, and you know, these are small differences, but this is a big shark. most sharks are not this big. And so if we're seeing these differences, what that means is that if you only use one big generalization to say, okay, here's the EFH of the future, this is where we need to focus our energy in order to preserve this population, you would miss a whole bunch of diversity. A whole bunch of animals would not survive. And so hopefully this kind of thing is going to be able to help us better pinpoint these critical habitats in the future. So that's kind of the heavy science stuff, but I wanted to leave you with a little bit of conservation. So, and this isn't all depressing, I promise, it's just mostly depressing. Shark finning, that's something that I think people really hear a lot about because it's horrible. But actually the shark meat trade is much more of a resource. It's actually a huge trade in a large part of the world. Shark meat gets exported all over the place. And as you know, they grow so slowly. They have so few babies. There's not larval sharks just floating around. I really wish there were. They'd be so cute, waiting to become adults. These are things that if you take out 100 million per year, it's like taking out 100 million people. They don't just come back. And so, people eat them. Hey, that's not a problem. They're fish. It's just the over-exploitation that's a problem. Sport fishing, that's a thing. It does have an effect. I don't know. I think all the fishermen that I know and am are usually the ones who know the most about the animals and care the most about them. But they're very fragile. Sometimes sharks will die even if they're released live, and it's because of stress. So if you're catching sharks and you want them to, even if they swim away, if you want them to survive, just leave the gills in the water. Don't take them out. Has anybody ever been on the beach and just seen a dead shark in the waves just kind of rolling around the surf? Anybody? A couple of hands. Yeah, that shark was released live. Probably most of them sank offshore, and it probably swam away and it just died because it was stressed out. So angling, unfortunately, does have an effect. Bycatch, that's probably one of the biggest because they compete with tuna fishermen they compete with the tuna for the prey. And so, that's a problem. That's a thing, but probably the worst reason is fear. And it's a good reason why that's true. I recommend none of these. That's not true. The first Jaws is iconic, but the third Jaws don't even, sharks don't roar. Let me just put it that way. They don't have voice boxes. And so all of this really preys on people's fear of sharks, which is normal. It's not going to happen. It's really the fear of the unknown, but it's the most normal thing in the world. But let me give you a little perspective. So in reality, 99% of all shark attacks, I should say, are non-fatal. And on average, we have maybe 50 attacks per year, not fatalities, attacks. Here we have about 58% of those attacks. Yay, we're number one. And anywhere from 0 to 1 fatality every 2 years. You guys know where the shark attack capital of the world is? New Smyrna Beach. You know where number 2 is? Brevard, that's where I live. And guess what? We've never had a fatality. Why? Because what we get is something called a slash and dash attack. These things, sharks are prey. They're fragile. You don't live for 400 years by being an idiot, right? And so sharks are more timid in that they will eat something dead, preferentially over something alive, because their normal prey can really hurt them. Their normal prey has spines and claws and beaks and can really hurt the shark. And so what they tend to do is they'll kind of come in and they'll bite. And, you know, like the big ones, they'll come in and they'll bite, and then they'll back off, and they wait for the prey to like bleed out and get weak, and then they come back. And that's at the point where humans get out of the water. And so that's why we tend to survive shark attacks. But here in Florida, what we get are small sharks. I know some of you might have heard Dr. Steve Kajura at FAU, who's amazing, talk about the blacktip sharks. Yeah, at some times of the year in Florida, you're no more than maybe 100 feet, yards, something like that, from a shark, because they're not dumb. They know Florida's nice in the wintertime. Yeah. And so we tend to get these smaller sharks, and they will swim, and because they're chasing fish, that's their prey, chasing fish, and they end up, if they're small, chasing those fish into fairly shallow water where people tend to bathe. And so what happens here in Florida is the shark will kind of come in and be like, feet, and then it'll like slash somebody's ankle and then be on its way out. That thing's flying, it's gone. They're prey. They're prey for bigger animals. So yeah, very few fatalities. Only anywhere between 0 and 5 global fatalities per year. Again, not here for the most part. The 3 species responsible for most of them: bulls, tiger sharks, and white sharks. Bull sharks tend to be the most famous for that, but the reason is because they're a big shark, but they're smaller than those other guys. And so they tend to come closer into shore chasing their prey than the other big guys. And what we think shark attack is really a case of mistaken identity. These things evolved 400 million years ago. We are very much, lost land monkeys in their environment. They didn't evolve to eat us. We're land animals. But they're opportunistic. And so sharks, being opportunistic, don't eat out of hunger. A shark is no more likely to attack if it just fed versus if it's been starving for weeks, because they're so careful. That's why doing something like you might have heard, punching a shark's nose or gills will get it to back off. Yeah, because it's careful. And they're very, 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 very nervous. So even just standing up has been shown to get sharks scared, because nothing in their world can do that. And they're like, what are you? You could hurt me. Ah! It's true. All right, so just to give you a little bit of perspective, things that kill more people than sharks. I'll give you a moment. Have a safe word. Yeah. Vending machines you might have heard of, don't shake them. Selfies, the Grand Canyon, selfies at the Grand Canyon. Yeah, you're more likely to be struck by lightning 3 times. Sorry, moms and dads who have to explain autoerotic asphyxiation after this talk. Yeah, you're more likely to be struck by lightning 3 times than you are to be bitten by a shark. Never mind killed by a shark. You're more likely to be bitten by someone from New York. Kid you not. It's true, you can look it up. Yeah, and Black Friday, Walmart Black Friday in particular, mountain lions in some years kill more people than sharks. Coconuts, TV sets, very dangerous. Yeah. Football, high school football even by itself. Yeah, so, and this is good for a laugh, but if it doesn't make you feel ultimately super safe, it's totally okay. I understand. Fear of sharks is super normal. I mean, I feel that way. If I'm on the water and I can't see underneath, it feels sharky. Yeah, just don't let that feeling keep you from going in the ocean, because it's not gonna happen. I will even put the word out personally for all of you with the sharks. So remember, sorry. So what can you, I didn't realize I had an extra slide in there. What can you do if you're still worried about shark attack? Because again, totally normal, natural thing to do. Don't act like bait. If you're in the water, don't splash around. People think, blood, right? Blood, sharks smell blood. But sharks, all of their senses are good. And actually, hearing is what brings the shark in the fastest. And so if you really want to see a shark, go diving and bring with you like a 2-gallon empty soda bottle or something and go wah, 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 underwater, because their prey struggles. It's like big vibrations, big fish. If you see a shark and go like this, you're acting like prey. Don't act like prey. Don't act like bait. Don't swim with your dog, because they do. They get like famous shark attack in Hawaii. Woman was killed off of Maui, and they think because she was swimming with her dog. Don't touch a shark. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't touch a shark. Even if it looks dead, don't do it. Just don't do it. If you want to have a long, painful conversation about Ocean Ramsey and how she harasses animals for fun and profit and sells it as science, we can talk about that too. However, you should know the way you can tell a scientist from not a scientist is because we don't touch them. So, Ocean Ramsey, riding sharks is bad. Don't do it. And then, if you get bit, nobody will be surprised. I mean, nobody will be surprised if she, So just don't mess with them. Don't try and ride them. I know you guys wouldn't, but people do. There's some really fun videos online that you can go, and they're very satisfying because you can see people pestering sharks, and then at some point there's a baby nurse shark, and at some point the guy is trying to kiss it, and it bites his face off. It's good. You should check it out. So with that, I'll just say thank you so much for having me. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Yeah, anytime. Yeah.
Have you done any genetic testing on the other estuaries up the coast, like St. Helena Sound and Albemarle Sound?
Yeah, we have samples from Georgia. Yes, the question was, have we gotten any data from any bays, I'm guessing in between northern Florida and North Carolina? The answer is yes. However, there aren't a ton of them, it turns out. The way the animals have been using the space, it's only North Carolina and Pamlico Sound where they've seen this big influx of baby sharks. And they think what might be happening, the folks that are managing the habitats in those southern states, is that the habitat isn't exactly right. There's not enough fresh water in most places, and they're competing with other baby sharks, like sandbar sharks. They're more cool water sharks. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Our home is Manatee Pocket, and about 13 years ago, so maybe 2013, there were a whole bunch of bull sharks. And I have video of it. So I was thinking, and I know that that's uncommon for Manatee Pocket. We have a lot of nature, a lot of beautiful nature, but not normally sharks. Do you think it was maybe the South Florida sharks trying to figure out where they were going to go?
Oh, I don't know. They're probably just finding food. Yeah. So when they're in their reproductive season, it's usually a fairly specific time of year. And bull sharks, they can go straight up into the rivers, but most sharks can go into brackish water. And so where they congregate is where there's food. And so, for instance, I remember, gosh, it was a bunch of years ago, but there were these shark attacks in Virginia, and everyone was like, oh, it's the summer of the shark. Why are the shark attacks crazy this year? Come to find out, there were fewer that year than there had been for a while, and the next year too. It's just that there was a very strong current system. I forgot to repeat the question again, didn't I? The question is, are the bull sharks that have come into Manatee Pocket potentially, that aren't there usually, are they potentially looking for new places to give birth? Are they finding their way up to new nurseries? But probably not. They tend to go where they themselves were born, which is why it's so unusual that some of these mamas were going further abroad. But in general, when we see that kind of concentration, it's because there's some sort of like warm water current that brought in a bunch of fish. And also, other sharks can go into fairly brackish water. So it might not have actually been bull sharks.
Toby, let's grab a question from one of our Zoom viewers. How does shark feeding dives affect shark behavior here in Florida?
That's a good question. The way they affect the behavior here in Florida is very similar to how they affect behavior elsewhere, which is sharks are not normally territorial. They don't have a territory. They don't patrol. And that's because in nature, there is really no such thing as a really consistent food source. But when there is a consistent food source, like a shark feeding operation, the sharks will get more habituated. And so the ones that kind of come around through their normal yearly migration near places like Jupiter, where we have a lot of amazing diving, they will oftentimes come, to the wrecks where they're feeding the sharks, not to make like a special trip from across the ocean, but just like, oh, okay, we know this resource is here. But it's hard to tell, really, because it may be somewhat changing the shark's behavior, but at the same time, it's exposing a lot of people, and this is true for all ecotourism. When it's done well, it can be a huge source of information, because fear of sharks is fear of the unknown, and there are no laws protecting them. There's no such thing as shark-safe tuna like there is for the dolphins. And so come to find out, if you don't know much about sharks, they're really scary. But if you do, then all of a sudden they're amazing and people care about them. And so the trade-off is, if you can't see the animals because they're not being fed or they're not in captivity, how are we going to introduce people to these creatures in a way that isn't like, they're coming for you and your children? So yeah, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but as far as we can tell, we don't know what they would be doing otherwise. But they're not there. I mean, sometimes the folks feeding the sharks are there and the sharks are not. So in the back.
With specifically focusing on bull sharks, when is the pupping season? Does it fall during the summer months when a lot of other things occur, like nesting and everything like that, or is it other times of the year as well?
Good question. He's asking when is like bull shark baby time, and that's usually in the spring and summer. And it's true for most shark species. I mean, just like for birds, they migrate like birds because they can't stand it too cold or too hot. And so they tend to, I mean, it really just depends on the species. But you're no more likely to get bit at that time than any other time, because they are not, at least the females are not feeding. And the males stay a little further offshore. And also bull sharks, as far as we know, I mean, I'm sure they'd be happy to eat a cute little hatchling or something, but turtles are not a huge part of their diet because they're too big.
We have a good follow-up question from Zoom. What age do bull sharks become sexually mature, and how many babies do they have each year?
Ooh, good question. They can have, I want to say, up to maybe 12 in a litter, anywhere from 4 to 6 to 12. It really depends on the size of the mama. Bigger mamas can fit more in there. They have 2 uteruses, so twice the fun. And they don't give birth just any time, because the babies would die if they weren't in the right conditions. And so the estuaries give them a place where there's a lot of little baby bull shark sized food. It's relatively shallow, protected from bigger sharks, which are the ones that tend to eat baby sharks. Yeah, in the back.
How long are you seeing that bull sharks are staying in the Indian River before they go back out?
It varies. We're not, she asked how long the babies stay in the IRL before they leave. And the short answer is a few years. It really depends on where the babies are, what's the temperature, what they find to eat. But in general, they're there until, and we're not sure exactly how old, but they're there until they're just kind of, they're not exactly adults, some are like little adults, like sub-adults, so not completely mature. And they start going further and further, and then they just eventually start migrating with the big guys. Yeah. Yeah.
Right now, they're doing sand nourishment on some of the beaches, right on the other side of the Indian River Lagoon. Would that stop some of the mama bull sharks migrating in from moving the sand?
Probably not. I'm sorry, I'm so bad at that. She asked.
We haven't seen as many fish, so for them to eat.
She asked if the beach renourishment that occurs on the coastline could potentially disrupt the mama sharks getting into the lagoon, and probably not, because the sand shifts so much in nature. We think they're probably homing in something about the location, but not, they're not like, they're not exactly like salmon. Like, they're not going back to like the same exact stream. And they are probably more put off by channelization. The fact that, we changed the inlets and they can only get in as Sebastian, or up north. And so that kind of thing probably has more of an effect on them being able to access the habitat, but we have not seen a drop off. We haven't seen them going away, but yeah, that's what we think. Yeah.
Do we know why sharks don't get cancer?
He said, do we know why sharks get cancer? And the short answer is they do get cancer. Yeah, they're just really good at not. And so shark immune systems have been studied as a model for human biomedicine for a long time, because they invented it, thank you very much, and they passed it on to tetrapods, to four-legged creatures. Actually, bony fishes has a very different immune system than both us and sharks. And so they do get cancer. It's a myth that they don't, but they have really amazing mechanisms for inhibiting what's called angiogenesis, when a tumor disrupts the blood vessels and basically gets the body's blood vessels growing to feed the tumor. And that is called angiogenesis, growing these blood vessels. And that doesn't seem to happen nearly as much in sharks. But also, we're still finding out a lot of what's going on, partly because they're all really different. I mean, there's more evolutionary time between a baby bull shark and the dogfish shark that you might have dissected in biolab in school. There's more distance between those than there is between like us and frogs. They all look the same, but they're incredibly different. And so we sequence sharks' genomes and we're like, oh, all sharks. And then it's like, no. Even the really closely related ones sometimes have different numbers of chromosomes. It's crazy. Yeah.
Myth or legend that a bull shark can survive in fresh water all over the Midwest?
He asked if a bull shark could survive in fresh water all the way to the Midwest. I don't know. If there were a straight waterway, I don't see why not. I mean, there were a bunch of bull sharks that were like trapped in a golf course in Australia. I mean, they actually really like fresh water. There are sharks in the Mississippi. There's sharks in Lake Nicaragua. There's sharks in Lake Pontchartrain.
So we have a good related question from our Zoom audience. Why? Why are bull sharks found hundreds of miles up the Mississippi or down the St. Johns River? Those are freshwater environments.
Yeah, I mean, because they can. It's like, why climb Mount Everest? Like, it's there. And they were there when the river was there, but we weren't. We've been around for maybe 20,000 years, right? Our species, and then our ancestors, maybe 200,000, going back a little further when we were four-legged. But we've been us for Homo sapiens, 200,000 years? Modern humans, more like 20,000 years. And these things are 450 million years old. That's when they started. And so that is, they've been here for a long time. We are very much Johnny-come-latelys in the evolutionary spectrum. And the question is, will they be here for much longer?
And that's a good lead into this next question. If 100 million sharks a year are dying, when are they going to go extinct?
I mean, we've lost 70% of them in the past 50 years. So over a third of the rest are at risk or vulnerable to extinction. About 45% of those we just don't know about. 45% of all sharks are what we call data deficient, meaning nobody's studying them, nobody knows. We're at the point where people are going into like fish collections and museums to like take a good look at what the stuff is in like the dead fish collections and being like, oh wait, you're a brand new species. And they've discovered a new species that has now, then they figure out it's actually gone extinct in the wild. So unfortunately, we're there. They don't get a lot of press, but you know, there's some animals that we know are kind of like the poster children of extinction, like the polar bear. And then there's some entire groups that we're worried about, like bees, amphibians, and unfortunately, sharks are one of that company. Yeah.
How do you tell how old a shark is?
He said, how do you tell how old a shark is? We used to be able to look at their, you know, we've tried. Language problems, just Duolingo is what. No. Actually, that's funny you ask that, because one of the major discoveries of the past few years with regards to shark research has been, we're doing it wrong. So sharks lay down, what you do, and it's unfortunately, you have to kill the shark to do it. They lay down growth rings in their vertebrae, like trees. And so you sacrifice the shark, it's like otoliths in a fish. It's like how you would, bony fishes have these weird little ear bones that lay down growth rings, and you can section them and you count the rings, like tree rings. And that was conventional wisdom. But then people started catching sharks and tagging them and injecting them with tetracycline, which is an antibiotic that they dye label with a fluorescent dye. And what that does is it lays down a fluorescent band in the vertebrae. And so they let that shark go, and then they catch it like 10 years later. And so now they've got a few of these, and what they're finding is like that shark has been at liberty for 10 years, but there's maybe like 2 rings in the vertebrae. So what we've found out is that after sexual maturity, after they start migrating, the rings are no longer annual. So we've been underestimating shark ages for a long time, which makes sense because something that stays pregnant for 2 years doesn't die at the age of 30, you know. But for these new studies with the sleeper shark, they have been analyzing the isotopes in the vitreous humor of the eye. So it's a whole new technique that people have started developing because we have no idea how long they live. We've been doing it wrong.
Let's grab another Zoom question. One of our guests is wondering if there's any ongoing research related to the impacts of temperature on cold water shark species. And this may relate to the conversation we had before you went on stage tonight.
Yeah, it's amazing. You would think that with warming water temperatures, we're most worried about like the ones in the tropics where it's already hot. You would think that the cooler temperature ones would be okay because it's still pretty cold there. Like it's got to change a lot before they see any impact. But in actuality, we're finding that the opposite is true. And this probably has something to do with evolution. And it was also the case for geologists who studied the biggest extinction event that we've had on Earth, which was 250 million years ago. And it took out something like 75% of all life on Earth. And what they found was that in actuality, and what we're seeing now, is the fishes in the tropics are actually doing better. We're seeing more issues with the cooler water ones, and what we think is happening is that the ones in the tropics have been subject to extreme warming events, extreme temperatures for a long time. They've adapted to those. And so they have potentially these very novel heat resistance genes that have kind of gotten them pre-adapted or pre-evolved to face modern temperature change. And so we are actually now seeing more of an impact on what we think the cooler water populations are starting to move, or they're moving and we're just catching on. Yeah.
So 70%, was that like mostly concentrated in the like 70s?
We were asking about the 70% of sharks that have disappeared in the past 50 years. No, that's been accelerating. Yeah, fishing pressure has been accelerating. Yeah, there's no, this is not getting better, unfortunately.
We have another one from Zoom here. There seems to be a growing narrative among fishermen in Florida that there are too many sharks. Do you have any input on this?
I do. Shark depredation, when the shark takes a fish off of a fisherman's hook, is a big problem. And it's getting worse because there's no food for the sharks elsewhere. These things are smart. They remember. They're seasonal movers. They can migrate, come back. They apparently have friends. We didn't know they have friends. They have friends. They have like buddies they hang out with. Other sharks. We don't know why. They're weird. But yeah, it is now the natural food sources are depleted. And so if there is something like a fishing pier or a place where people are fishing, the sharks will potentially go and be more willing to try and compete with the other sharks and the fishermen for the fish before they get reeled in, because they're simply not getting food elsewhere. So it seems like there's more because there's more depredation, but it's because they're not elsewhere. They're coming in to those places because they have to. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes, I've always wondered, you talked about not looking like their food. Why do divers always wear black that make them look like seals?
She asked why, if we can potentially get eaten by sharks, do divers always wear black? Because those things are really not flattering, even at the best of times. Seriously, people think they're all cute. Well, sharks, she said, why don't people wear a color outfit? Sharks, when they are looking, they have mostly rods in their eyes. Like we have rods and cones in our retinas for black and white and shading and also color. Sharks have more rods than cones. So they're looking at really light levels. And so the way they tend to feed is by basically by contrast. So like I showed that picture of a sea turtle and a person on a surfboard with their feet out from below. And that profile that's illuminated between the light from the sky and the dark of the turtle or the person is kind of what they key in on, is that profile. But even more is the movement. So, you know, their normal prey is, well, here we don't have a lot of seals. So, and you know, it's really white sharks that are kind of famous for eating those guys, and that's really what they do. They're more colder water, fast-moving sharks. Here, it's not as big of a problem, but really, it's honestly, they key into, more than anything else, they key into that motion. And so if you see a shark, regardless of what you're wearing, and if you're black, wearing all black, you know, there's no contrast. But also, we make a lot of noise. I mean, just bubbling at a shark with a regulator will get it to freak out, because it's like, it's not taking any chances. But actually, in some parts of the world, there's a myth about wearing yellow. Some people call it yum yum yellow. Have you guys seen that? I actually went out with the Florida shark divers in Jupiter for bull sharks. We were collecting samples one time, and one of the folks on board was like, "Oh, you have yellow fins. Oh, it's yum yum yellow." And I was like, "No, I want people to be able to see me as I drift away underwater." But in general, the sharks will key into behavior before color, and that's why they're really looking for something that's hurt. They're like lions, you know, or lionesses, really. Lionesses don't go for like the fittest, healthiest, fastest young gazelle. They are picking off the weak, the old, the young, the ones who shouldn't be reproducing anyway. This is why sharks are so important to the ecosystem, is because it's their responsibility for keeping all the other levels of the food web in control and in balance and in check. And without the predators, diseases spread. Without the predators, the prey species eat themselves out of house and home. And so without predators like sharks, which are not just apex predators, but mesopredators in the middle of the food chain, you risk getting something like an extinction cascade, which can result in ecosystem collapse, unfortunately. So, yeah, I don't know, I find the black ones just to be the most flattering, sort of the best of a bad deal. Yeah.
Is it safe to assume that dolphins and sharks are competing for the same food source, and do sharks typically attack dolphins?
He asked if sharks and dolphins compete for the same food sources and if sharks attack dolphins. They definitely compete for some of the same stuff, but it's usually the other way around. Usually dolphins will attack sharks. Yeah, dolphins are big. They're bigger than most sharks. They roll deep. They're like, they've got themselves and their buddies. Most sharks are small. We hear about the big guys, but you know, most adult sharks are like this big. And so, and you know, dolphins have all of that sociality, and you know, people think white sharks are the apex predator, but in actuality, it's orcas. Orcas are the top of the food chain, and they are the biggest dolphin, and all dolphins are just, you know, a little more rapey and cannibalistic than people realize.
We have a neat shark physiology question coming in from Zoom. If sharks need to keep moving to breathe and warmer water holds less oxygen, do sharks have to swim more or faster to breathe as a result of warming oceans?
Good question. No, we see them relocating. So they're sort of built for, depending on the shark, built for their lifestyle. If they have, you can tell by the tail fin, if the tail fin is like almost like a half moon, that's like a really fast shark, like a white shark, mako shark. If it's more like the ones you see every day where the tail is like really big on top and smaller, those are sharks that they're made for just sustained, slow cruising. They home in on a scent trail from prey, potentially miles and miles away from that prey. They're not patrolling a territory or patrolling a beach. They're really just kind of wandering around. And so like any other creature, they have a sort of homeostatic happy place, just like us, where if it's too cold, you're unhappy, and if it's too hot, you're unhappy. And so they will surround themselves with the type of temperature that they can tolerate, given their lifestyle. But yeah, warmer water has much less oxygen, and so we're seeing more issues with sharks that can't escape warmer water. And that's one reason why we do the research we do, because, you know, sharks in the Atlantic, we know that they're going up to Pamlico Sound. It's great. They'll probably end up in Maine eventually. But what about the ones in the northern Gulf of Mexico? Right? They got nowhere to go. Yeah, but they don't. I wish. That's the question, right? We put tags on them, we watch them. But they're not mating there. They're not living there forever. They're visiting. They're probably eating out and then they're coming back. And so that's a problem. If we lose all the sharks and the bull sharks in the Gulf of Mexico, they're not just going to come back like we think they will. Yeah?
I have another one. Don't they kind of look for the easiest to get? Because I watch a lot of the sailing
Yeah.
out in the Bahamas, more and more. They come in, they anchor their boat, the sharks come.
Yeah.
Because they're catching fish and they're throwing them.
Yeah.
And so they just get used to it. Like
Ye-
the white shark up in the Cape.
Yes.
And then they
So he's a
couple of seals. Now they have all kinds of seals. They have more white sharks.
sort of, kind of, yeah. The white shark, so all of these, he's asking, I think you're asking, why do the sharks come in to the fishing boats, or why are there more of them?
Yeah, well, like the sailboats. Yeah, they're learning, okay, the boat's there. We probably are gonna get food.
Yeah, that's why fishermen are seeing more depredation on their lines. They're seeing more sharks, but there aren't more sharks. They're just there. So now sharks that are in the wild can't find enough food, so they're traveling further and potentially more willing to stay around a stable resource like a fishing boat than venture out to try and get food elsewhere. So it's not that there are more of them. Yeah, it's like saying, I don't know, it's like, why are there so many lions and tigers at the zoo and not everywhere else? It's like, there aren't any. That's the only place where they're at now. Yeah.
We're just,
There are people that wear bracelets or bands.
Girl. Okay. Let's chat about, no, I'm just kidding. So there is research going on metals. So sharks have this amazing electrosense that they can use to navigate thousands of miles and sort of root out prey that's buried. And so what those things, basically metal in general has an interesting effect underwater. Saltwater kind of buffers electricity, but so research has shown that the certain types of alloys, some sharks are repelled by, other sharks are attracted. Most sharks don't care. If you go, I had someone ask me about shark bands recently. I went to their website, and because they have all this like scientific evidence there, and I looked and I read, and it's true, there's science there, but if you read it, the science says this is no better than control. So they're putting evidence on the website saying, oh, yeah, nobody's going to read this, and nobody does. So how about this? If it makes you feel better, no, I'm not kidding. This is what I'm saying. Like, know that being scared of sharks is normal, but they will not hurt you. And if having a bracelet on helps you feel that way to the point where you're not afraid to have fun and recreate, because it's Florida and this is what we do, we fish, we surf, we swim, right? We dive. Then that's the important thing.
and I know we've got some other questions, but we're just about out of time. So let's wrap up with a question from our Zoom audience. It's always nice to leave these lectures with a take-home message that we can use to maybe create movement or action on our own lives. This guest wonders whether there are any pieces of legislation currently being discussed or voted on that would help protect sharks or their habitats, since we are currently in a legislative session here in Florida.
I think that there's a lot of attention being paid to restoring the Indian River Lagoon, and all of that is going to help because it is a nursery. And even though we have these animals offshore, swimming around, healthy and happy, if we don't have a habitat for them to stay as babies, the offshore populations are going to be gone. And so I think that anything you can do to encourage your representatives to support and fund research into seagrass restoration, into toxic sludge, not sludge, but the sludge, you know how they're trying to remove muck, thank you. Mitigating some of the runoff from agriculture, just, support those efforts. And I know it's cliched, but you're supporting it just being here. You're supporting it if you're donating to the organization. I support most of my students and my research on grants and donations. And so there's not a ton of federal and state funding, certainly not for sharks. They're not big fisheries species. They tend to eat people. It's not good press. So part of the problem is there's just not a lot of research funding available, which is why there's so little we know about so many sharks. But supporting lagoon restoration with your voices, with your pocketbooks, and with your vote.
All right, with that, I hope you guys can help me give Toby a big thank you.
Thank you so much.